Hey everyone, and welcome to the Outmaneuver YouTube channel. Today, we're diving into a budget Boba Fett deck tech. As everyone knows, Boba Green is a meta menace. With top-end cards like Darth Vader and Boba Fett unit, the deck can get really expensive. So what options do we have for players on a budget? Well, I think Boba Red is the best bet. This deck will not include Boba Fett unit as the card is $50 each, but obviously if you have the card, I would highly recommend adding it to the deck. But without further ado, let's dive right in. So we're going to start off with the events first, and the first one we have here is Shoot First. Many Boba Fett decks have been cutting this card, but I think with this version of a deck, you really want to be controlling, keeping your units on the board and removing your opponents, and this event really allows you to do that. The next card is Force Choke, which is very good up against the aggro decks, which is why we're only playing 2, because it's not great in every matchup, but this really helps you fight the Sabine decks and helps you against other Boba Fett decks. The next card we have is No Good to Me Dead. This card allows you to play a much more tempo-based gameplay than other cards. While it doesn't fully remove your opponent's unit, it does help you outpace the opponent's deck. I think this is a very important card and really great on leaders like Han or other ones like Leia who have really good on attack abilities. Surprise Strike is also a great event in this deck. It allows a ton of reach for those control decks, and sometimes even allows your smaller units to trade up with bigger units. This is also good with some of the shielded units that we have in the deck, allowing you to keep your unit in play, which is one of the main goals of this deck. Open Fire is also here to help protect your units by clearing away any other pesky units your opponent may have, or dealing with those difficult to deal with Millennium Falcons. And that rounds out all of the events for the main deck. Now let's dive into the units, the core of the deck. Greedo is a must-have in all Boba Fett decks at this point in time. With Boba Fett's leader ability allowing you to untap a single resource when an enemy unit leaves play, this allowing you to play a Greedo once you've used up all your resources is a very impactful play. And playing Greedo on turn 1 allows you to trade or attack for 3 on the second turn. Unlike Greedo, Bib is our next unit, and I don't think he is a necessary required in the deck, but I think in this slot you can run him or Crafty Smuggler. They both are shielded and are both reasonable plays on turn 1, Crafty being a little bit better, but where I think Bib really shines is allows you to get tricky and interesting with some of your event packages. Next we have Cartel Spacer. While Cartel Spacer does not really trade very well in the air, I think it's still an important card to have for turn 1 to at least be able to fight in space if you need to, or just having a reasonable tap down ability to be able to race decks like Sabine or other aggro decks. Viper Probe is our last 2-drop, and I'm going to use the word premier in quotes, but it's the best 2-drop we have in the deck currently. It attacks for 2, has 2 defense, so it's not super easily defeated, and you get to get some information from your opponent. This is ideally your best turn 1 play in this deck, and the one you should be looking for most times. After that, we have Fifth Brother. Again, without having Boba Fett unit in the deck, Fifth Brother is kind of the deck's best option, and he's not amazing, but he's fine. He's not the easiest to defeat on turn 3, so we play him reluctantly, but that's unfortunately where we're at when we're only playing with commons and uncommons. Next unit is 7th Fleet Defender, and this is probably our best turn 2 play. 7th Fleet Defender comes in shielded and is a 3/2, so very few cards deal with this unit effectively. Make an Opening is really the only one that can do it properly. The next unit is Cell Block Guard. While this unit is not great against control, it is a great addition up against aggro, and if you're at an event where you're playing commons and uncommons, I would say that you're more likely to see an aggro deck than you are to see a control deck, so I think leaning your deck more towards aggro is probably your best bet. So Cell Block is an addition in this deck. You could put in other options if you're facing more control decks in your meta, and I would go with Swoop Bike Racer if that was the case, to be a little bit more aggressive. Now we're getting into the good stuff here. Imperial Interceptor, which is a 4-cost 3/2 Imperial ship that says when played deal 3 damage to an opposing space unit, is a good way to really thwart your opponent's space attack Again, more for the aggro decks than the control decks or other Boba Fett decks. This allows you to at least somewhat deal with the 7 fleet defenders. So if you were to have yours readied, then play this on their 7 fleet, they will likely trade into your interceptor and getting a 1-for-1, and you'll be able to keep your shield and your 7 fleet defender. Next we have Wampa, which is a 4/5, and really he's only in here for curve consideration. Otherwise you'd only be left with an interceptor on turn 4, and you don't really want to limit yourself to one turn 4 play and it only being space. So Wampa on the ground is not amazing, but he's fine. 4/5 Overwhelm is fine. Again, we're playing with commons and uncommons, so we're not going to have all of the best cards, but this is going to be the best option I think you'll have for right now. And the final 3 cards I think is where the deck really shines. Bosk is an amazing card, and one that you're definitely going to want to leverage as best as possible. One of the stronger plays with this deck would be Bosk on 5 to be able to defeat one of your opponent's units, readying a resource, and being able to play Greedo. Or then deploying Boba Fett leader, attacking, having 3 resources up, and playing like a 7th fleet defender or a 5th brother. Now you'll also see in here I have 5 Syndicate lackeys. This is definitely a spot that's in here to defeat other Boba Fett units. That's the best thing it does. But also there's plenty of 5 health units like Kanan Jarrus or even Sabine Wren, the leader, that Syndicate lackeys do a better job than Bosk at defeating with ambush. And last but definitely not least, the way you're going to win many games is with the Ruthless Raider. This is definitely your finisher and one of the best options you have, considering that we're not running any Fett's Fire Spray, as that is a rare. The Ruthless Raider is a 4/6 6-cost ship that, when deployed and when defeated, it deals 2 damage to a unit and 2 damage to a base. So a single attack with this should net you 6 damage to the base, and then once it's defeated, 2 more, so 8 total. And if you can get multiple attacks with this, then you're probably already winning the game. So this is one of the best finishers you have at the uncommon slot. Like I mentioned previously, we will mention some upgrades here at first. I think the first and cheapest upgrade I would consider would be Tarkin Town, the base. It's only running a couple of dollars on TCG Player. So that's something that I would consider first and foremost over Kestro City. Next, I would definitely consider getting in some Fett's Fire Sprays. Those are better finishers than Ruthless Raider. I probably wouldn't cut all the Ruthless Raiders. I'd probably cut maybe 1 Ruthless Raider, an Interceptor, and 1 Syndicate lackey for the 3 Fett's Fire Sprays. Some other budget options you could consider as well for the deck would be Bombing Run. If you're having problems with any aggressive decks, you could also run some amount of Change of Hearts. It is a legendary, but they're relatively cheap on TCG Player. I think they're only like $5 or so. And if you are playing best of 3 at your casual event, for control, I would definitely consider something like Forced Surrender in your sideboard as a 3 of. That's a card that I would highly recommend. It is a very powerful effect to be able to strip a bunch of cards from your opponent and be able to draw some cards yourself. A notable omission from this deck is Waylay, as it is a common and definitely playable in the deck. This deck is definitely tuned more to defeating the aggressive decks, because like I said, I do believe that if you're playing in a casual format, you're more likely to see aggressive decks than you are to see more control decks. But if you do see more mid-range or late-game decks, I definitely would consider putting in some number of Waylays, maybe trimming on the Surprise Strike, Open Fires, and maybe putting in 2 Waylays there would be an option. Another interesting option could be Sneak Attack, since we're playing Ruthless Raider. It's definitely a way to finish off some control decks as well. Maybe cutting, this could be a sideboard card, and removing Shoot First, and the control matchups for Sneak Attack could be an option to be able to sneak attack in some Ruthless Raiders. Another substitute option I would consider would be Jabba the Hutt over Wampa. Jabba adds some extra synergies with Shoot First and Bib, then running more Waylays would be more enticing, and some sneak attacks. And Jabba is not very expensive, only running a couple dollars on TCG Players, so it's something that I'd also consider as well. Another interesting aspect you could take with this deck is running more Force users with Seventh Sister and Emperor Palpatine. Then you could run things like Force Throw, which would definitely be a very powerful effect, considering Boba can untap 1 resource, and the most powerful one resource card in the game currently is Force Throw. So that would definitely be a big swing turn for you with this. And if you can ball out for the Boba Fett units, I would do that. If you have the units, though, I probably would consider mono yellow Boba as an option. This is kind of if you don't have the Boba units, but you still want to play Boba Fett. This is the deck that I would play. If you had the units but didn't want to shell out for Vader, I would definitely consider a more mono yellow Boba with cunning. Alrighty, folks. Well, that's it for today's video. If you liked it, hit the subscribe button. And if you want to see more, hit the like button. Thank you so much and have a great day.